My name is David Engel. I'm an emeritus professor at the State University of New York at Buffalo Law School. My main field is law and society, with a particular focus on personal injuries. I study both in the United States and in Asia, particularly in Thailand, where I've lived and worked for many years. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I greatly appreciate the invitation to meet and talk with so many colleagues and students here at the NUS Faculty of Law. Okay, so law and society is a field of scholarship that incorporates the social sciences and humanities along with the study of legal doctrine. The idea is to learn how law and legal institutions actually function in society, how they affect or fail to affect the lives of individuals at whom they're targeted. To me, the term law and society means more or less the same as socio-legal studies. In fact, that's the name that's given to the organization in the UK. As a law professor, I've been drawn to law and society as a field simply because it was essential for answering questions that I wanted to investigate about how personal injury law actually functioned in American and Asian societies, and also how ideas about rights were made manifest in people's lives. Well, it is somewhat surprising that personal injury claims are relatively rare, since the public image of tort law is that it's very widely used and that most people who are injured will bring a lawsuit or at least consult a lawyer. But in fact, we have quite a lot of research now showing that such responses to injuries are actually quite rare, that something like 4% of injury victims will go to see a lawyer and perhaps 2% will actually bring a lawsuit. This is quite well established in the research literature now, but what I find interesting is to ask why. Why is it that injury victims so seldom invoke the law to deal with their situation? In my lecture today, I put forward 5 different explanations for the scarcity of personal injury claims. I can mention 1 or 2 of them now. For example, I mentioned what I call normalization, when the occurrence of an injury is interpreted as something that's just a normal part of life and not the result of extraordinary or negligent behavior on the part of the injurer, then the injury victim is less likely to see a potential legal claim and pursue it. Another example that may be somewhat surprising, since injury victims are thought of as feisty and contentious people, is that a very widespread response to injury or indeed to pain in general is to blame oneself. So there's a tendency in society to blame the victim of an injury, but also there's a tendency for the victim herself to say, this occurred because of my own fault, I'm to blame, and it would be wrong for me to bring a claim against somebody else. Other explanations deal with questions of causation, with cultural norms, and issues of that kind, which I hope to discuss more fully in the lecture itself. Yes, I want to be clear that I'm not necessarily saying that there should be a great deal more litigation than there already is. However, tort law is meant to achieve certain goals, and if it's used very seldom, then those goals may not be achieved. One example is that tort law is meant to function as a kind of canary in the mine shaft. If there's a problem in society, a risk that might confront many people, then tort law is meant to signal to those responsible that there's an issue here that needs to be addressed. Tort law is also supposed to provide compensation for the victims of injuries, and it's supposed to control the behavior of those who are putting others at risk. If it's used very seldom, or if it's used too seldom, then there's a risk that those goals will not be achieved. Speaking more generally, though, if people are becoming alienated from the law itself, if they're questioning the value of law and legal institutions, then it seems to me that's a broader systemic problem that could lead to behavior that violates the boundaries of the law, that makes people feel that the law is not working for them, that they're the victims of unfairness or inequality. And we need to know that. If that is a widespread sentiment in society, it seems to me that failing to understand it, failing to explore it, and try to listen to the voices of those who are feeling alienated may pose greater risks to society as a whole.